Hey there, this is Russell. Welcome to another standard operating procedure, the IntelliFi live broadcast. It's Sunday, May 9th, and I had the date wrong on today's announcement, but nonetheless, we're here today. Today's another episode where we're going to be looking at the project tracker. We've been building that up over the last several episodes, and today we're going to continue. We've already added the task weighting capability, where each task for each site, when it's completed, it adds the proper amount to the overall completion. So today we're going to continue that, but you might want to segment the project by region or by the assigned engineer, or there's lots of different ways that you might want to do that. Maybe different sites are equipment of different vendors. You could segment it by the vendor if you were performing the same checklist of tasks for all the vendors. But the key point is you want to break it down so that in addition to the overall project completion, you can see completion by that segment. So completion by region, or completion by an individual engineer or a technician, or however you've set that up. Segmentation is kind of the way I think about that. So let me get that up on screen here, and we'll just get started. Let's see. Well, I think I'll just start by sharing Excel. I'm going to share my whole screen. It's a mess, but that's the only way to get Excel to play nicely. Okay, so here's the dashboard that I've been working towards. This is one that here just updates automatically. Refresh the pivot tables and the latest data is incorporated here. Okay, now I do say bring in the latest data. I'm an engineer, so I try and be, pretty specific in the way I speak. Bring in, there's 4 ways that I know of that you can bring in the latest data. The first way is you can just type it. You might just type the data in directly. That's one way. Second, you can copy from an external source and paste it into your workbook, right? That's the second way, copy and paste. The third way is you might import it, maybe a CSV or some other structured file, just import that directly into Excel. So there's your third way. And then the fourth way is you might have some kind of structured query, like an SQL query or something like that, that links to an external data source, brings in that new data, right? So there's the 4 ways you bring in the new data. And whichever way you use, that's the first step of this of updating your dashboard. The second step is refresh your pivot tables. It just couldn't get any easier. Bring in the new data, refresh the pivot tables. That's it. So all the work we do is geared towards that approach to make this as automated as possible. Now let me get to sure, there we go. So here is the one we've been working on. And where we were last week, I thought it was here. Yeah, this is where it was, because I left myself a note in the last episode. Where was my note? Task weighting is what we're doing. Yeah, here we go. So this page is going to become the dashboard. And here's my note. So I said for the next time is we're going to try and use index match. So right now, we have not done regional yet. And instead of doing regional, I'm just saying these were people who were here. Of course, I'm Russell, but Abel, Mario, and Mary were here for the previous episode, and I just used their names to illustrate this, yeah? But what I've got here is not correct, because right here, here's the latest. This row is the latest week in the data. It's a little bit, the data's a couple years old, yeah? So, but the latest project completion is 52.4%. And what I have here is not 52.4%. If I add all this up, I'll bet it's going to be 52.4. Nope, it's only half of it. Sure, there was work done in the past. Yeah, work done even before, right? You can see here, 10 weeks ago, I was already 28% complete, right? So all of this plus 28, that's going to be 54 guaranteed. So what I need to do is, what I'm showing here is the amount completed this week, the percent of the project that was completed this week. I want to show the cumulative completion, okay? And I got started on that. See, here's what I've got there, right? Here's the part that it shows now, right? And what I've got over here is the cumulative part. The way we did that was, it's just a sum function. If you can see that on the screen there, right? It's the sum function from, replace that, instead of the get pivot data function, which is getting it right out of the pivot table. I could just put P3. And if I do this properly, it's column P3. Yeah, we'll just do it like that. But you see that still didn't, I didn't do that. It's not what I wanted. That still didn't get me exactly what I wanted. What I want is not P3. See, here's P3. I have already summed that up, right? So I really want V3. It's V3 on responsible complete, so it's right here. And so now, if I sum that up, that's going to be 52.4, and it is. You can see it down here in the lower part of the screen. All right, 52.4. So now it's what I want. So, and I could also do this. It'll make a little more sense if I just merge and center that. See, so now for Abel, just to recap this, you can go back and look at the config. By sites, there's site lookup, yeah. So you can see for each site, here's the site name, and here's the region, and here is the responsible. So I've got a lookup table for every site. I assign a responsible party, and if I come and look at my updates, I made that a synthetic field on my data table. So here's the raw data that gets added. Anytime someone makes an update in a site, they provide this update, gives the site ID, the task, and the date. And just as a lookup, I can say, oh, that's that site 12, that's Abel. You can see it's just a Vlookup function. Pretty straightforward. But now I can put that responsible into a pivot table. Here's the pivot table. And you can see responsible over here on the right is right there. So I'm reporting weekly progress by responsible. And that's basically, I map that over to here. And then I sum it over here. Now, this works as I add data. Let me explain how this works. I want to show you index match because that's a really handy function. But I don't really need that here because the way I've set this up, let's go back to my config. The way I set this up, the year week derives from column K3, which is here. K3 derives from date used, which is there, date used. And date used always changes based upon either user input. I'll show you what I mean. So if I put in January 1st, oh, that's going to be goofy, 1/1/2019. Now that's my date used, and this is the first week. Whoa. Yeah, the first week of 2019. If I don't use a user-derived input or user input, it's going to based on just the maximum date in my updates table. Updates column I, right? So it's going to use the maximum value there. Max of column I. So these dates are all based upon, with no user input, these dates are based upon the most recent date in the data. Always be the most recent weeks of the project in descending order. So this field will always be the current or the most recent week. Okay. So that's how that works. There's another way we could do that though. Back on my dashboard here, I'm just taking advantage that it's already there. The dates are incrementing automatically. How about we just do this easily? Make it white, and then just the ones that are I noticed yesterday or last week in the office that when print the lightest shade, the printer we're using now doesn't show anything. It's too light for the printer to represent. That's okay. We'll leave it like that. So this works because this is the same thing. This date here is config M3, which is the same as here, config M3. So once again, I'm always getting the most recent dates. But there's another way you could do that. Index match is just an elaborate lookup function. So you may be familiar with Vlookup. Vlookup, I've used it, I'm sure. Sure, here's a Vlookup where I'm looking up the task, H3, in my task lookup table, and I'm looking up column 4, the fourth column in my...
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you. Could you please repeat what you said?
Siri. There you go. Where were we? I'm going to look up the task in my task lookup site config. There's config tasks. Well, you can see if I just click here, task lookup, right there's my task lookup. And I wanted column 4, the weight. The weight is how much of the overall project is assigned to that given task. Here's all my tasks, right? Here's all my tasks. Here's the weight I assigned to each task. It's in the 4th column of that table. And that's what displays right there. For responsible, it's the task lookup divided by, this one here is how many sites does this person have? So this person is Russell. So this is going to be the weight of this pad ready task divided by how many sites I have. So completing that task in one site will be that amount. It's 1.5%. Sure. This is where I derive. Russell has 4 sites. So if I look at my pad ready right there, pad ready right there is 6%. I have 4 sites. 6% divided by 4 is 1.5%. So completing pad ready in one of my sites is 1.5% of my overall project. You see that? 1.5% of my overall project. So that's just a Vlookup function. But if I wanted to use an index match, I could do that right here. Match takes a lookup value, which is going to be the task, and looks it up in an array. I haven't named this, so I'm not going to. Task. So here's my array. And I want an exact match, which is a 0. So you can see that pad ready should be the 7th row inside that range. So let's look at the config. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Pad ready is the 7th row inside that array. So let's come back, and now I want to use the index function. Index, the first argument is the array, which is task lookup. That's the array of sites. And then the row number. Well, I want row number 7. So what it's going to do is find the 7th row in this array or this range and return. I'm going to return column number. Remember, it was 4. There was one more. It's optional. Right? So there's 0.06, which is 6%. 6%. But then I have to divide it by the number of sites assigned to Russell. So and I need to fix this one because it's not always Russell, it's column E. Anything else to adjust in there? Pad ready, that's always correct. H3, yeah, that's good. So now I get my percentage. It should always be the same as column F. Looking pretty good, don't you think? So that's the index match function, index match. So I always start matches on the inside. I do the match first to make sure, just in case I make a mistake, I can see right away I'm matching the way I want to. And the result of match is the second argument to the index function. So I start with the match, and then I wrap the index function around the match. Just make sure I make the match result the second argument to index. So you can see that there, and let's see. If I do this, I try to do this so you guys can see the formula a little bit better. How about that? Kind of a long formula though, yeah? So here's my match function. Right there. You can't see that any better, can you? Sorry. Can I color that? I don't remember if Excel allows that. Sure. There's my match function, right? And it's surrounded by this index function. Oh, what's a good color? You won't be able to see that very well. There you go. So index, the array, the row matched, and then the column in the array that row should return. Okay, that's index match. It's just another lookup function. And it's just another lookup function, and it works differently. So let me explain how index match, how that works differently, and when you would use index match. So let's come back here and look at the tasks, right? So a Vlookup works okay here, right? Had all my days of the week. Oops. There's the days of the week, right? But for a lookup function requires the lookup field. Let me finish this. Let's say it's all my 3-digit days or 3-character days. So for example, let's say I wanted to use this as a small table to, when I'm given the long name of a day, I can return the short name. So I could use this. The short name would always be the second one, right? But lookup always requires that the table is sorted. So let's sort that. So now this is not the normal order, sequential order of days in a week, but it's alphabetical, which is what lookup requires. So this is my short day lookup from long day, right? But what if I had the opposite case, right? Where, oops, sorry. If I had the opposite case where I was given short days and I wanted to produce long days, it needs to be sorted by the first column. Now this is still sorted, but how about this? If I assume Monday's my first day of the week, if I assume, so now if I had, this is a better example, let's forget about that one, that's not very good. If I was given the long name of the day of the week in the first case, right, and I wanted the day number in the week, this will work, right? But if I was given the day number and wanted the long name of the week of the day, I'd have to use a different table because it needs to be sorted. So now it's sorted. I could use this table if I had the day number of the week. I'd use this table to give me the day name. if I had the day name and wanted the day number, I'd have to use this table. So I have two different tables, right? So that's a limitation of lookup, is that first column has to be sorted. But if I had this table and I use a match function, I could use this table to get, I would match, if I had the day of the week name, I could use this table to get the number. I could also use this table, given the number in this column, to derive using the index match function, because index match does not require them to be sorted. They only have to be unique, but that's also true for lookup functions. The index column, the lookup column, needs to be unique in both cases. But index match, they can be out of order. They don't have to be sorted, which is often the case. So here's the example I would use for you guys. Let's go over here to the site lookup. So here's your site ID, right? And for now, I mean, you probably have this in your network, but you probably also have, maybe you have sectors included. You know, I mean, for a unique site identifier, typically you would have it'd be, you know, maybe a 5-digit site number, but then you'd have 1 character sector, right? Alpha, beta, gamma, for example, or if you've got 6 sector sites, etc. Then you might also have technology, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, right? So 1, you see, that's not going to work, because I'm sure as soon as I say it's a 1 character technology like 2G, 3G, somebody's going to have a 3.5G HSPA overlay network or something. So it's a single character won't do it, right? So maybe 2 character technology. This is just a mapping on your site ID, right? But this might be your site ID, and a real network might be, right? And then a sector, alpha sector, and maybe it's a 4G site. So 4G LTE, right? For example, I'm just making this up. I'm sure you've got your own site identifiers, but I might have the name, alpha, maybe that's the name of this site, the region, maybe this is in the Western region. I'd also have azimuth. You know, where's the antenna? What's the main direction of the antenna? Or antenna type. Or maybe site type, like rooftop or tower or indoor. I don't know what you've got, right? You might have a much more, so every network I've ever worked in, somebody maintained a table like this, and it was usually a big table, every site and sector in the network, plus a whole bunch of information about each one of those rows, right? You have all this data. Well, the site ID is always unique, right? So you can look up site ID, and it won't have to be sorted. You just use the site ID, and you can look up anything in here. Sometimes, though, you might have a couple of different columns that will be unique. Maybe the name of the site is unique. What else? You might have, I don't know, RF fingerprint. That wouldn't make any sense. But using an index match function doesn't require it to be sorted. Again, like I said, if this was your lookup table and you wanted to use the lookup function, you'd have to duplicate it to look up on any other unique column, like the site name. With the index match combination, you don't have to do that. Any questions about that? What do you think? Any questions about using index and match? So once again, here is, normally it's just called index match. And the way it works is, what was that over here on config tasks, yeah? Update, yeah. So doesn't look a lot better right there. But you embed the match function inside the index function, and you don't have to sort the data. Also, I've read that index match under the hood of Excel is much more flexible and, is much more efficient. So if you have a big lookup table, I think Vlookup is going to have to traverse the whole table because it's sorted. It'll have to look up in order. But match does that more efficiently, and then index just grabs the data in that row. It doesn't have to look. Index is not doing the lookup. I've read that. I don't know if it's true. Okay. Any questions about that? Like I showed on your up. See, I can find that. I could use index match here. I could also use index match here in my table. So if I do this again, so index match is, here is, how would I do that? Yeah, sure. So here I'm going to use match. How am I going to do that? The lookup value is going to be the week. We'll try that again. Equals INDEX. Now I should do it the other way. Do it with my match function. It is match. I'm going to match the week in this array. I'll do the whole thing. Doing the whole array makes it future-proof. And it's going to be an exact match, right? Exact match. And so E8, that value, well, it's always going to be row 1. Lovely. Pivot responsible complete. O3 to Y43. O3. Oh, sure. Yep. Sorry. My bad. I want to look up the week number in just O3. And that should always return 1. There will, all of these will return 1 because the week number, remember how we said this is defined, right? It gets the week number both here and in the dashboard. It's always a link back to the original data, the actual data in your updates table. So it's always going to be that value, that first, well, it's always going to be cell M3, which is always going to be the first row. Always will be the first row here, right? So if I go across here, they're all looking at this date, right? But again, it's always the, and if you go down there, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10. See? So that's how that works. That's the match function. But now I'm going to do my index, and what's my index going to be? I'm going to find this row inside this array. Index, and then it's the array. And I want to make sure that's anchored. I anchor that because I'm going to fill it later, and I don't want it to change because of the fill. And then a comma, and then my match row number. And then column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is going to be able. So you can see that is the same as this. But honestly, this is a better way to do it. Because I've already done the work. I don't have to find it. Remember, the distinction was because of the way we set up the dates, these top 10 rows are always the most recent 10 weeks in the project, always. So I don't have to do this elaborate mapping here with index match. It's just not necessary. It's just not necessary. I'm using it to show you how, as long as I'm showing you, if this one is column 8, this one will be column 9. I don't want to do that. So I could fill this one to the right. And be column 9. But now all these columns are disconnected. You know, you can't use fill on a raw number. And remember, it's bad form to put a raw number into your formulas. It's just, that's not a best practice. So what I'd prefer to do is, I mean, what I would do if I had to use index match in this situation, I would do, yeah, here's what I do, is there's 7 rows, 7 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. And then this. So I would do, I'd use the columns function. 7 columns plus column. I'm in N8. N8, did I get that right? Yes, N8. I'm going to anchor that. And now I can do this. And you can see I've got it. It all works out. So remember, best practice is try not to put a naked number like an integer, or, you know, don't put 3.14 when you meet pi, because you might not later remember, oh yeah, I meant pi, right? So create a named range like this, right? 3.14, and name the range. Now you could have put pi in your formula, right? That way you don't embed into a formula a raw number, or a naked number, because that's for sure, if you do that, it'll mess you up later. Now I've still done that, right? I've got, what's this naked 7, but I could create, you know, lookup columns, something like that. Yeah, it's 7. Lookup columns or pi. I can find that here on my config worksheet. Then all those definitions are in one place. I don't have to go looking around in the whole workbook to find them. But there you go. That's how I got around that. And I can still use the fill handle to fill these other 4 columns. Any questions? Oh, hey, Abel. How you doing? Actually, I think we're working on your sites. You're only 16% done. Get to work, you. So anyway, that's the index match function. If you use a Vlookup or an HLookup, or even the new, there's a new function XLookup, which I think is supposed to be smarter, try using index match. And honestly, you know, for a lot of what I do, I still use the lookups because they're pretty simple. And I don't use big enough data sets that I feel a performance increase or a performance hit. If I did have something like the example I gave, like here, Fridays or weekdays and week numbers, for that, I would probably use an index match because then I only need 1 table. Whereas with a lookup, you'd have to have 2 tables. One would sort on the day name. The other table would sort on the day number. So that's just too much work. And now you have, you know, if you're trying to use that approach in your work, you know, you might now have back to the site list. You might have, what if you wanted to go the other way from site name to site number? You'd need to duplicate this whole table, right? Here's a better way to duplicate that. So I could now, and then I have to sort it. So now if I had a site name, I could figure out what the site number is. But in your network, this could be hundreds, thousands of rows, and now you got to maintain it in 2 places. You make a change to the site number, you add a site, you have to add it here also. Or if a site name is changed, or maybe you combine a cell, or you sectorize a cell, right? You've got a bunch of too much work. So for a big table or anything that's dynamic that changes very frequently, I would use index match. Create 1 table, even if it has multiple unique columns or unique values in it. I just use 1 table and maintain that, and then use index match instead of the lookup functions. So let's see, let's back up. Let's figure out, we're kind of about done today. So that was using index match, artificial example, because seriously, this approach, this is the better approach. But I wanted a real example to show you for index match, because with the site lookup table, index match is often the way to go. In your site lookup, maybe you also have lease conditions. You know, when's the lease expire on that site? Or what's the lease amount? Or the lease term? Things like that, right? Anytime you have a complex table that is maintained, if it has more than 1 unique value, a column having more than 1 column with unique values in it, I would use a single table and use index match on that table instead of lookup, instead of a lookup function. So let's see. We've got, well, here's the other one. So this is kind of interesting, but it's the same approach we've used already, right? Maybe we'll do that next week, but it should go fast because we already know how. The only thing different here, and I'm not comfortable to teach this, is conditional formatting. I'm not a huge fan of conditional formatting because I've always found it to be very fiddly. It doesn't work the way I thought it should, but the conditional formatting here was if that, might want to try that because I thought that was kind of challenging. Have to take a look at that. Okay, any questions? Any questions? So mostly this was about index match. You can see it still here in the chat. Give index match a try. It's really flexible. And for the reasons I've given, mostly if it's a big table that has changes to it, you should probably use index match on that single table rather than VLOOKUPs and then create copies of that one table. Okay? As always, if you've got a project that you're working on, you'd like some help with, reach out to me, email, or email's probably best. Happy to try and help you with it. See if we can, get you tuned up a little bit. I'm also thinking about, mostly I've taught Excel on these because, as you can look at me, I'm relatively senior. I've been doing this for a while. In my own experience, not enough engineers trouble themselves to become proficient using Excel. And what I've learned is Excel is one of the most fundamental tools we use in telecoms. Seriously, it's very fundamental. And I hate it. There's nothing telecoms in Excel, but it's just probably the single most important tool we use. Maybe you're using Atoll or Planet or some other propagation modeling tool, or maybe the vendor OSS. Those are important, right? But they're not really being good with those are not necessarily a portable skill. Your next job, they might not use Atoll, or a new tool may come along, but Excel has been the basic tool for telecom engineers doing telecoms for 30 years. You should probably feel confident that in your next job, you'll need to know how to do Excel, and being proficient with a fundamental tool is always a good thing. So, but that's why I teach Excel. That's why I've been focusing on Excel for these standard operating procedures episodes doing telecoms. Of course, 5G. Everybody's excited about 5G. I'm excited about it too, because there's some really fundamental changes in 5G. So it's important for that reason. But an aspect of 5G, there was a little of it, I think, all the way back to 3GPP release 12 was control plane, user plane separation. Now, to my knowledge, nobody really did anything with that in 4G until Rakuten in Japan did some of that with their network. But that's important because by separating the control plane and the user plane, it enables edge computing. The user data no longer needs to transit the core. You can do edge compute now because control plane user plane separation allows that to go from the RAN directly out to the internet. So that's an interesting capability. Virtualization is more of that. It allows for edge compute, and for a couple of years, it was called like a carrier hotel. You could aggregate your baseband units in one location, and then if you had fiber out to the actual radio units or the antennas, you could save some money by aggregating your baseband units and then just use fiber out to the actual air interface. And that's interesting. That, again, that facilitates edge compute, that facilitates virtualized RAN, vRAN. And as more and more, so one more thing that I think is really important in telecoms right now is Open RAN, because the disaggregation by breaking the network into smaller components. And if you've been if you've been around as long as I have, GSM sought to try this 30 years ago by defining interfaces. But back then, and even now, the traditional vendors say, "Oh, Open RAN, it just can't compete. It's not as much performance. You know, your radio unit won't do. You know, you'll spend more money buying more radio units because the hardware is not optimized for this." And I don't believe that. I think that's just the vendors, what do they call it? FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt, trying to scare operators into sticking with the old way of doing things. But between 5G, CUPS, control plane, user plane separation, virtualization, and Open RAN, some really exciting things are on the verge of happening. And although I've just taught Excel in these episodes, I'm thinking about spending a little more time on things like that. Love to hear your opinion. If you think that'd be good, if you'd like to participate in that, leave me a message, give me some ideas of what you'd like me to cover. For now, for the next few episodes, I'm probably going to try and finish up this project tracker, because it's the kind of stuff you do all the time. And back to my interest in, proficiency with basic tools, a tracker is something you'll use a lot of. And it's just a natural implementation of basic Excel functionality. I'd love to see you all capable of building your own trackers and using your own trackers, because it'll save you a lot of time and give you better data. And I think that's going to be good for your career.